Hello, my name is Tom Haxby. I'm a photographer, and today I'm going to do a little bit of a demonstration on how to focus stack your images. And that is taking multiple photographs with different focal points and then combining them in Photoshop or another similar software. There are other softwares out there that will do similar things to produce one image that increases the amount of depth of field that you would get as opposed to what normally you would get. Um, so let's get started. And what we have here is we have a photograph of a lily, and this is a macro shot. And this is a very common situation when you're shooting macro, is that really don't have a lot of depth of field. So in this case, one of the things you'll notice, and we'll show it a little later, you have a set of stamens that stand well up from the rest of the flower petals. And they're really beyond the amount of depth of field that you can get to get these into focus and get the petals in focus too at the same time. One of the things that you'll see, this is my browser in Photoshop, and you notice that I've got a series of pictures in here, and then I've got this picture here. I use this method, and there are other methods that you can use to indicate to myself later, after I've downloaded all of my images and have them on the computer, that these are the two images that I want to blend together. I may have 3, 4, or even 5 images that I want to blend together as well, but in this case it was only 2. So I know that. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open both of these into Camera Raw at the same time. And you notice that they both load into Camera Raw, and this one is highlighted and outlined, but this one is not. So I'm going to shift click so that they're both, and I'm going to be doing edits on them both simultaneously, and I'm going to pretty much do the same edits. Maybe a little bit of overexposure. I found this was a tricky one to photograph because there was just so much reflected light, so much glare on these flowers. I actually ended up using a diffuser to try to cut down on some of the glare. And we'll bump up the saturation just a little bit. It's looking pretty good now. I'm going to say, okay, done. I've done my edits in here. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go back into Photoshop, and I'm going to note the file names of both of these. DSC 2534 and 2535 are the two images that I'm going to combine together. So I'm going to go back to Photoshop, and I'm going to go File, Scripts, Load Files into Stack. I'm going to say Browse. So I'm looking for 34 and 35. There's the two images, and I'm going to open those up together, or load those into the stack together. I'm going to say OK. Now loading those into the stack as each one of is an individual layer. And you notice up in here in the layers that I now have both images. So I want to work on these both simultaneously. I'm going to click on and highlight both of them at the same time. This is where the fun part comes in. And it goes pretty easily. Now that you have them both highlighted in the layers, you're going to go Edit, Auto Align Layers, and you'll notice there are a number of different choices. In this case, 6 different choices. You can use Auto, Perspective, Collage, etc. I've found that auto works just fine. By the way, I'm using Photoshop CS6. Earlier versions may be slightly different than this, but I've found this works quite well. There are also other software programs that you can use, Helicon Focus, others that you can buy as plugins for Photoshop, etc., etc. Okay, we've got the layers aligned. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to auto blend the layers. And there are two choices here as a blend method of either a panorama or you can stack the images, which is what we want to do. One of the things I want to mention before I go on and actually, I'm going to stack the images. Yeah, take a second. One thing I want to mention is when you're taking your photographs. First of all, you don't want to have any movement in your photographs. You're going to end up with blurred images when you try to align those and stack those images back together again. The other thing is you need to be cognizant of is that actually changing the focal points may actually change the size of your image a little bit, so it may not quite align, or it may look a little bit fuzzy around the edges. And the other thing you want to do is you want to make sure that your focus areas overlap. That is, that you don't have an area in between your areas of focus, your different images that focus on different parts of the image that are out of focus. If you're, for example, if you're shooting a landscape, you have a focus point in the foreground and you step your focus points through the image. You want to make sure that those focus areas overlap. Okay, I've got this aligned and I've got it blended, and I still have two images though. And you can see what Photoshop does. It creates all the masking and everything like that I need to do this. What I like to do is I feel like I've pretty much got this. I probably have a little bit more editing to do, but as far as I'm concerned, I've got the image aligned and stacked. So I'm going to flatten the image. So I'm working on one image now, and I've got shortcuts set up to do this. And you see now I have one image. A little bit more work. For some reason it's still very much overexposed. I'm going to open up the curves with a Control M, and I'm going to bump this down actually quite a bit. I'm going to say OK. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do a sharpen. One thing you'll notice in here is that these little reeds and such, they actually had a little bit of movement to them. So that's okay in this case, I think, because really what I wanted to do is I wanted to get these in focus, and I wanted to get these petals in focus. Everything else around it was background, etc. So I can now sharpen this, and again I've got a little shortcut set up for that. I'll bump that up just a little bit. That's unsharpened, that's sharpened. I'm going to say OK. And the other thing I probably want to do is I want to do a little bit of cropping, kind of recenter this a little bit the way I want it so that it's not quite so bullseye, and it probably looks okay there. Hit enter, here's the crop, and I now have an image that has been stacked. As you can see, these stamens are quite sharp, and the petals, as well as the water droplets on the petals, are also fairly sharp too. Try this and get used to doing it. It's a fun way. The other thing you could do is you can buy a tilt shift lens, which may cost you several $1000s. And the more you work with this, the better you get at using it, and you'll look for opportunities to actually be able to use this. I do this quite often. Good day.